So I am thrilled to be here today with Swami. And I say Swami because his last name is 20 characters long or something like that. And he told me just to call him Swami. So Swami is from Amazon. He leads all their AI. But I figured instead of giving the pro forma introduction, as many of you know, Amazon's invested, I think, $4 billion in Anthropic. So I figured I would ask Claude 3.5, which is their LLM, their large language model, the three most interesting things that I should say about Swami. So this is what it came up with, and we'll see how we do. Okay. So Swami serves as VP AI and Data at AWS, where he oversees AWS's machine learning, AI services, databases, analytics, and other data services. How did you do on number one?
Oh, that was quite accurate.
Okay, number two, he was one of the key figures behind the development of Amazon SageMaker, which is AWS's machine learning platform, which was launched in 2017.
That sounds right.
Okay, and he frequently speaks at AWS reInvent conferences and other major tech events about the future of AI and machine learning and cloud compute.
That is right, too.
Okay. So the $4 billion investment was well served. So we're going to take about half an hour, and I'm going to ask Swami about some key trends happening in AI to sort of give the group an update on all the things AI related, and then we'll take the last 5 or 10 minutes for open audience questions. But I thought I would start out by asking, AI has gotten a lot of hype over the last year or two. But in the past, we've seen trends like Google Glass and wearables that kind of faded out. So, what is your view about AI? Is this the next big wave like the internet was or mobile was? Or is this just another piece of the overall tech ecosystem?
Great question. First of all, thanks for having me. We're really excited to be here. For folks who are celebrating Diwali, happy Diwali. For folks who are celebrating Halloween, happy Halloween too. So just on AI, let me start with, I think what's going on with AI is not just like because ChatGPT came in, suddenly AI became hot. If you look back, what is the reason why we are having this moment, especially with generative AI? It is because it is building on years of multiple technologies that came together to create this moment. Like, look 30 years ago when neural nets actually, the first neural net paper was ever written to where we are with, but at that time, those algorithms were completely heavy to be used at scale, because it needed extremely scalable, elastic compute, it needed specific accelerator chips, and it needed a lot of data. And then cloud computing came along, it provided scalability and elasticity. Then special chips and accelerators came along, so it solved the other piece of puzzle. Then, of course, data became more and more available as we were able to store huge amount of data and process them. And then finally, a breakthrough in machine learning technology, especially in deep learning technology, came along with transformers around like 2016 or 17. My memory is hazy. But that actually enabled us to parallelize this whole learning, being able to train on huge amount of data without having to manually label. All of these led to the culmination of where we are with generative AI. But why is there so much hype? Now, if you look at an enterprise pre-LLM era, I'll call it LLM. If you were to work on a problem like, hey, I want to classify sentiment of customer reviews to be good and bad. Or if I have a different problem around saying like I need to do like content moderation if there is offensive content. Or I want to clean up my data catalog to see if something is misspelled and so forth. Pre-LLM era, every team, each of these teams will employ different data scientists, different developers to do data to. Each will build their own machine learning model. They will have their own 2-pizza team or 4-pizza team or whatnot. Now, the beautiful thing in the LLM era, and you can see this transformation to some extent, is that no longer do you need to have dedicated efforts where you're starting from scratch to train a deep learning model to do translation separately, content moderation separately, or classification separately, your catalog cleanup separately. You can actually start off from a generic data point, like taking an LLM and customizing for these use cases. That is like a game changer, because suddenly you are able to democratize data science within your enterprise and not be constrained by how many machine learning students or PhDs or grad students or others you have. Now they can actually take an LLM and fine tune it. I know you have done some amazing things. Hopefully I get to talk about them, but data science suddenly being accessible to do so many things is kind of like a game changer. So now you can, that is one of the reasons why, to me, the Gen AI moment is not about a single model or a single assistant or search. It is about making machine learning accessible to solve wide range of problems for wide range of domains. So it is not just about customer service anymore. It is about reimagining the art of possible in like healthcare industry or transportation industry or financial sector, and so forth. Each of this, I can actually give every use case in each of them to even tell you why we are suddenly getting into such an amazing thing. And that's why in every boardroom now, you're seeing everybody talking about what can Gen AI do to creating net new customer experiences or decrease my cost. If you're a leader leading a large organization, you have to be constantly focused on saying, like, how do I delight my customers with net new experiences and increase my top line? But you can also think about how do I use these AI technologies to improve my bottom line as well. And you can do both. And that's why I'm actually excited by it.
So in your role running AI for the largest cloud platform in the world, you probably meet with a lot of companies. I know you do. So what are the most interesting use cases you've seen in terms of generative AI?
A lot. Actually, so few things just to ground ourselves, because when people think of generative AI, they think of like one assistant and so forth. So like it can be a ChatGPT or any of the assistant. To me, what we have to reorient ourselves is there are like multiple personas who will be using generative AI to do different things. And it is true in every enterprise. There are going to be like people who are, I call them the model builders or tweakers. So these are people who actually build their own models, either actually building from scratch like Amazon or Google or Anthropic or several others, or Luma or many of them. These are people who build models, foundational models from scratch. But there are also enterprises who take like an open source LLM and they want to customize it for their use cases, like maybe to classify reviews or to do sentiment analysis and so forth. It can be like they take Llama or Mistral and then apply for their use cases. Booking.com is a great example. They actually leverage AWS and our ML platform like SageMaker, and then they run through fine-tuning an open source LLM to do various aspects of personalization. And they are able to then leverage these to solve various problems. And then they deploy on our Gen AI platform like Bedrock, which I'll get to in a second. Now, not everybody wants to be building models, even if it is fine-tuning an open source large language model. For many, the promise of what makes generative AI exciting is application developers can solve really hard problems without having a PhD in machine learning, without having to open something called a Python Jupyter notebook or so forth. So that's what actually is exciting about it. For those, they actually want these LLMs as an API that they can actually customize it to do amazing things. And this is where we are seeing an explosion of use cases. Amazon has its own Gen AI platform as a service called Bedrock. Bedrock is a little different from everything out there. When it started, it was a very unique data point where we said a single model won't rule the world. We learned it in the database world that you don't want only to be locked into one database. Freedom of choice is important. So we started with model choice. But then the second aspect is, I as a business, for me, these LLMs should not be a generic entity. It has to be customized with my data for my business to provide differentiated experience so that I can do some amazing things. And being able to do that in a secure fashion. Now, with that in Bedrock, what we have seen, and we have been now out for 1 year, and tens of thousands of companies on all verticals are using it. We have customers like DoorDash, for instance, is automating huge part of their contact center and being able to save millions. Now, the second aspect is all around other popular use cases is like things around what Bridgewater Associates on the fintech sector is doing by building an investment analyst. When you think about the problem of actually making sense of huge amount of data sitting across disparate amount of documents and being able to actually generate insights and then help an analyst go build such a thing. And that, I think, is like very creative on what they have done with AWS and Bedrock and so forth. And the other one is the conversation you and I had like a couple of months ago. I thought I don't know how many of you are from here in Seattle, but the use case of what INRIX have done with Bedrock in building like a transportational planner. Again, it has nothing to do with just customer service. Being able to make sense of like huge amount of telemetry of data coming in from transportation systems and actually planning projects so that you can actually find out why is there a traffic jam on the exit of 405 when we are coming into here. And when will it go in? Can a transportation planner use generative AI to actually ask these questions and then solve it? That is like a game changer. Historically, these things in the transportation industry probably involve someone asking a question over email and then you sending it over to somebody else and they go and dig into the data and then come back maybe after a day or so. Now it can be done in like probably 1 minute or so. And the same thing is happening in health industry. These LLMs are, again, not just assistants. Now they are able to actually build biofoundational models that is being employed at looking at how to accelerate drug discovery or to even help with net new use cases. Just 2 weeks ago in a health conference, there were actually demos around like how these foundational models are able to innovate in things like aiding oncologists and so forth. So the use cases, what we are finding is like really amazing. But for that, you want to enable application developers to actually have the choice and the freedom to innovate, but with their data in a secure fashion. Now, that's what we enable with Bedrock. But the third thing, you're not going to reach the promised land if you only cater to model builders or app developers. You want this to be accessible to everyone, irrespective of whether they're an data analyst or a business stakeholder or a contact center or even software developers. And you got to meet them where they are instead of expecting them to write code to use these models. So that's where I do think Gen AI assistants are going to play a big role. Now, I'll just give an example of just in the software developer industry. We have our own Gen AI assistant called Amazon Q. Q has a solution, an assistant for developers. It has an assistant for business stakeholders and for contact center workers. Just for developers, it is a remarkable coding assistant. If you go to SWE Bench, it is the top assistant on coding. But the fact of the matter is, developers, even in your own organization, they spend probably only 30% of their time writing net new code. So you all wish they wrote more code, but they end up spending a lot of time dealing with software upgrades, patching, maintenance, and various other aspects, like figuring out how to improve code coverage and how to optimize performance and so forth. So a coding assistant is not the end game to make developers productive. So Q was the first one to do full software development lifecycle. And within Amazon, this year we put Q to work to upgrade all our Java software. And just this year alone, in Amazon, we have actually saved, I think, up to $250 million worth of CapEx. And if you think that is impressive, to me, the more impressive fact is so far this year alone, it saved 4,500 developer years, not hours, years. And to me, that is like just an example of the power of what Gen AI could actually do. And it is really focused on solving a real world problem in terms of the impact. So I know it was a very, very long answer, so I will just stop there.
No, it's okay. So last year at this conference, there was a speaker who talked about peak AI. Right, we've trained these models now using every page on the internet. They've read every book. They've read every tweet. So they're not going to get much better, right? That's one view of the world. There's other people who write articles about time inference compute and new ways of doing AI that are going to lead to these step function increases in intelligence. What's your view on where we're at? Are we in the in the final inning, or are we just on the first inning?
I actually think we're just getting started. So I don't think, I hope for the industry's sake, AI models have not peaked, because they still are not accurate when it comes to reasoning capability. Just look at the agent benchmarks, right? When everybody publishes these agents, they look at how good they are in task completion. They are not yet 100%, where you can't actually just deploy these agents to work with always 100% guarantee in that front. So that's why you see so much research going on into actually chain of thought reasoning, and not just at the training time, but run time, so that it knows how to reason out if it is accomplishing, just making progress towards the goal, if not what it needs to be done. The second part is also that I actually think you're going to see more and more techniques that are being learned, not just from the LLM world, but also from other technologies, including math and other reasoning, to add a sense of guardrails around determinism. Then the third thing you'll see more and more research is the world is not just about text and images and videos. Humans are amazing because we actually consume informations in multiple modalities, and we are able to actually make sense of them, put together to make an inference around our situation. These models are not using all the modalities together to do certain things. But the moment you make them a compute problem, so imagine if you're in a healthcare industry and you have to analyze, saying like, hey, is this cancer metastatic? And in terms of, is it spreading? Right now, to even read such a thing, you have to first get 3 different disciplines within the same hospital to first meet together. They all need to look at the data together. They all need to make an assumption on inference and so forth, and then exchange notes before they actually come to a conclusion. Now, if you have the data and then you pass through, not a generative model, it is not generative AI, but they are able to actually pass through a deep learning model and then tell what is the inference in terms of, is this actually what a pathologist would do, and help pathologists actually identify, not just using human eye, but say, you might want to check these spots and so forth, and be their assistant. Because again, machine learning models don't make decisions. They actually make predictions, and we got to be really, really careful to not confuse these two. So we should not use them in areas where you have extreme criticality in terms of affecting life and death decisions or affecting civil liberties or various other things. You need to have the right guardrails. But the art of possible just changes when you actually combine these evolving advanced reasoning capabilities, being able to take multiple modalities, and then bringing together actually all these things together in an action with the right guardrails. I actually think that's when you will see bigger and bigger impact across huge amount of industries.
Great. So we're in an election year. There's been a lot written on AI bias. Google got in trouble earlier this year for releasing a Gemini engine, which was notorious for kind of its bias. I'm curious on your thoughts. What can we do as a society to ensure these AI models are unbiased in terms of the answers that they give?
First of all, this is a really important topic, right? Because at the end of the day, these models are learning on data that that is available in the internet. So, and the way actually they end up actually learning sometimes picks up based on how these models are trained in terms of even in an unsupervised fashion. It's not like somebody is going and manually labeling them one way or the other. But then how do we actually ensure that when you're building an application, that you have the right guardrails? That is the more important question for us to answer. So the key thing first you want to actually focus on is just the models alone. When you are actually creating a generative model, you have to think through things like how do you actually handle not just toxicity in inputs and then filtering them out, but potentially toxicity in outputs. And also figuring out, if I'm generating an image, how do I make sure that consumers of those image can differentiate between what is a real image and what is not a real image. So technologies like watermarking and others are going to be super important. So that's why even last year, we actually launched our own Titan image generator with watermarking technologies, and we're continuing to improve it so that it stays tamper-proof and you always know. And we are working with other industry and academia providers so that watermarking technology becomes like a standard that then phones and everything can automatically decide saying, okay, this is an AI-generated image instead of an image that a human took. That is like an example of an innovation that model providers will do. But application developers who are building their own Gen AI applications, they have a responsibility to figure out what guardrails do they need to put on the input and the output. Sometimes it is like very simple that if you're building a customer service chatbot, your guardrails can be very simple, like don't talk about competitors or don't talk about election and politics if your job is to help someone with healthcare decisions. So stay in topic is something, very simple guardrail that is probably the most useful thing. Most of them will help so that they actually stick to what they know. But the second thing is you actually want them to also filter out hate speech and violence and other kind of abusive content, both on input and output side, because these models can still be tricked into sometimes telling what they are not, should not be saying. And that's where you need the guardrails. And these are the big area of investment. When you see what it takes to build a Gen AI application, a huge amount of work goes into this aspect of it. That's why even if you see Bedrock, we actually make guardrails as a core capability because we have seen what it takes from going from prototype to production. People spend a lot of time building these guardrails because they are afraid that I don't want to be in a situation where I had to deal with all of this. It doesn't mean everybody is going to be always 100% proof, but this is an area that we constantly as an industry also have to work towards addressing. But also help each other in terms of making sure we help customers on thinking through what is actually which responses are accurate, which responses are could have hallucination, and provide the right guardrails and caution as well.
Good. So let me ask one more question, and then we'll take questions from the audience. But George, since it's your conference, go ahead and ask.
What do you think? Does AI reinforce the power of Amazon, or does it empower its competitors to a greater extent? Do you think this is this data center model of AI where only big companies can really afford to train the data? Doesn't that reinforce Amazon's dominance? Or if we have new distributed AI, can we challenge Amazon's dominance?
So it's a great question to think about. It's less about who is going to be dominant or so forth. I think if you see the history of why AWS was successful, it's not because it is about building a wall around everything. The biggest reason AWS became what it is because We just purely focused on how do you unlock developers to innovate faster and move faster. And we actually didn't dictate you should only use this proprietary software and this proprietary database. We gave developers the freedom to innovate. And they didn't have to wait for 6 months to procure a server and procure enterprise license for their operating system or databases and whatnot. A startup could actually get around and building without raising capital, just with a credit card, and get going and building. And that was the reason AWS has become this powerful. To me, if you fast forward what is going to happen in the generative AI era, who actually is going to be successful is the end developers who actually embrace AI to first rethink what is the art of possible. If I'm building an application then can I reimagine business to be like 10x more productive and so forth? It's less about the model builder, more about who actually leverages these models to create net new remarkable business. But then how do you make them successful as a person offering these models as a service? Again, this history has taught us that giving developers the freedom to innovate and giving them choice is always going to be the right strategy. That's why if you see Amazon, when we even started with Bedrock, even though we built our own models and we still have it, we actually said, you know what, a single model won't rule the world. You actually want multiple models. And even we find our own developers, users of Bedrock, more than 50% of them use more than one model. So that means the conventional notion that whoever owns one model is going to actually, and it's not correct. End of the day, developers actually want the ability to move fast and the freedom to use what they want. And sometimes they actually use the open source Llama models and fine tune and then actually deploy it on Bedrock and like what Booking.com or others do. So, and sometimes they use Claude, sometimes they use Titan embeddings and so forth. So the space is so early that it's a little bit super hard to actually determine that a single model will rule the world. I'm very skeptical it is going to be that way, that a single model will rule the world.
We have only a few minutes left if there's anybody else who wants to ask a question. But let me just ask you, a lot of press recently about AI agents. What's an AI agent and what's new?
Sure. Actually, think about if you see what we as humans are doing work. Let's think about things like what I use the Amazon software development upgrade project, right? Like, it sounds so boring when you think about it, but developers in your own teams if you're using Java, they had to upgrade from JDK 8 to JDK 17. So, and the way that workflow happens is they have a set of packages that is running in production, and then they have to upgrade to JDK 17. So they first go through, here is the series of steps that happens in a human workflow. First, one developer goes and upgrades these packages, and then they find a bunch of dependencies and errors saying, like, this doesn't work. Then they actually talk to fellow developers or checks online and then sees how to resolve these dependencies. And then says, okay, now let me go resolve these dependencies to do X, Y, and Z, and so forth. And then they actually produce a new set of code that works on JDK 17, and then they do unit tests, performance tests, and so forth. And then they look for deployment and so forth. This is like an example of human workflow. Now, what did Q do? Q built an agent which actually does this transformation by automatically figuring out each of these steps, using a combination of not just LLMs, but also compilers. Because there are certain things where you don't need to only give it to machine learning. Compilers know how to compile code. So I don't need an LLM to tell which code compiles. I need LLMs to actually tell, if I get this error, what could be the best way to resolve this third-party dependency? That could be a useful thing. But I don't need an LLM to verify if this code compiles or not. So Q agent in this example is an example of how you do it with an AI-assisted manner That is one of the simplest, easiest example. But these kind of agent capabilities are getting more and more remarkable as you can actually use different tools, such as being able to leverage a computer or being able to do what historically robotic process automation did, and so forth. So that's why we are all excited about these.